Hello, my name is Dr. Richard Milne, and this is the introduction to the second climate change exercise. Now, on screen we have a list of 10 commonly used tactics for deceiving the audience in the media, misrepresenting science in various ways, and in particular climate science. So I'm going to give you an example of each one, and we'll start off with the most blatant one, which is the lie. So this is where a statement is wholly or partially inaccurate. So, for example, climate change is a hoax, carbon dioxide doesn't cause warming. Those are both hoaxes, they are both themselves lies. So, for each of these, I've got an analogy of a guy on the Titanic trying to convince everyone the ship is never going to sink. So he might be saying, the ship can't sink, or there's no such thing as icebergs. Okay, moving on to our second example. This is the half-truth. Now, a half-truth is where a statement is made that, while accurate, leaves out such important information as to be deceptive. In climate change, for example, the climate's changed before. That's a half-truth, because if you don't know the details, it makes it sound like all climate change is natural, which it absolutely certainly is not. It's the equivalent of a man on the Titanic saying, well, the ship can steer, so that will allow us to avoid icebergs, when the reality is it can only steer so far, and the faster the ship is going, the less it can steer to avoid icebergs. Number 3 is completely true, but irrelevant. It's like saying basically something that's completely accurate, nothing wrong with it, but when presented out of context, it can appear to be a challenge to the science when it isn't. Like, carbon dioxide is plant food. Yes, it is, but does that make any difference to its role in global warming? No, it doesn't. So this is like someone on the Titanic saying, well, no ship this size has ever been sunk by an iceberg before, which is true, but obviously because there hadn't been any ships that size before. Right, number 4 is confusing science with politics. This is making a political statement and then dressing it up as a challenge to the science. So, Kyoto hasn't worked, wind farms are too expensive, carbon tax is too unpopular. Those things may or may not be true, but none of them are any challenge whatsoever to the science of what's causing climate change. So when we're talking about the Titanic, you might be saying, well, if we don't go at full speed, we'll be late arriving in New York, so we should assume icebergs don't exist. So it's a political statement, we should be going faster, which dresses up a sort of an opposition to the science of icebergs existing and being a problem. Right, number 5 is confusing belief of the public with evidence. Sometimes you'll hear someone saying, well, the public belief in climate change is falling away. People don't believe this stuff anymore. Well, science isn't like that. Things either are or they're not, whether people believe them or not. The Earth did not suddenly become round in the last 2,000 years just because people started believing it. It's always been round. Climate change will happen whether we believe in it or not. So we move on to number 6, which is misdirection. Now this is, oh, look, over there, Mars is warming. Oh, ooh, look at these naughty scientists. Look at these emails they've stolen. Look what they're saying to each other. It's distracting the attentions of your audience away from the hard evidence. And if the evidence for something is very, very convincing, then your best hope of stopping people believing it is to make them look elsewhere. This is how magicians work. It's how pickpockets work. Now, if your man on the Titanic is trying to ensure that the ship crashes into an iceberg, then as the iceberg appears, he'll say, oh, look, dolphins! Everyone look at the dolphins! So that's the sort of thing. Number 7 is cherry picking. This is a very common tactic of misrepresenting the evidence. So you choose your evidence very, very carefully and you make it look as if the trend is the opposite of what it really is. So I might say, oh, England beat Brazil 2-0 in a football match in 1984. Therefore, England are a better team than Brazil. And you probably all know, whichever country you're in, that that's total nonsense. In the terms of climate change, you might say 2006 was warmer than 1998, therefore the world is cooling, which again is nonsense. Those 2 years have been cherry-picked. On the Titanic, our friend might be standing on the back of the ship as it's tipping up, and he's saying, well, this part of the ship is going higher, not lower, therefore the ship isn't sinking, it's taking off. Okay, 3 more to go. Number 8 is what I call promoting the maverick. Now, in science, you always have, well, you often have, when the evidence is really, really strong, a consensus. Most scientists believing a theory because the evidence points that way. But there will always, always be one or two who, no matter what the evidence say, no, I don't believe the consensus, I believe this. And actually, that's healthy. That's how science works. And very, very rarely one of these mavericks is right. Where the problem comes is when the media takes the opinion of one single maverick and treats it as being superior to that of all these thousands of scientists who believe what the evidence currently says. And so this becomes a deception, and not always through the fault of the maverick themselves. Number 9 is the false expert. This is where someone without any expertise in climate change is presented as an authority on the subject. It might be a chemist or an astrophysicist or a geologist. It might be an art historian. Very often it's a politician, an economist, or the member of the board of an oil company. And these people are trotted out in right-wing press or wherever, and their views on climate change are treated as being gospel. This is like somebody on the Titanic saying, look, I found this guy here, he works in the engine room and he says the ship's unsinkable, ignore everyone else, listen to him. Finally, we have the straw man, attacking the actual theory of the science or attacking the people it comes from by misrepresenting them. So you might just say it's activists who say the planet is warming, it's environmentalists who say CO2 is warming the planet. That's a falsehood because it is scientists who are saying these things. Environmentalists are saying, do something about it, man. But that's the political side. The scientific side is carbon dioxide is warming the planet. Also, you can have a misrepresentation of the theory itself. So saying that, well, scientists say the sea level is rising because sea ice is melting, when in fact, when ice on water melts, it doesn't change the volume. True, that's why scientists are not saying that's what's rising sea levels. Sea levels are rising because the ice on land is melting and because of the thermal expansion of water. So our friend on the Titanic might say, well, they say icebergs can sink ships because they move around at 30 miles an hour, but I know for a fact that they move very slowly. Clearly, no one is saying icebergs move at 30 miles an hour. He's misrepresenting the opposing argument. Or he might say, who is it that says this ship is sinking? Lifeboat manufacturers, that's who. And again, misrepresentation. Okay, those are the 10 forms of deception, and I've given you a list of claims that have appeared in the press, and what you're asked to do is match these to these various forms of deception. There may be several for some of them, and basically, good luck.